Hi, this is Will.
And this is Sri.
Welcome to Technium, where we talk about the edge of technologies, its implications for the future, and what we can build with it. An optimistic look at the road ahead. Hello.
All right.
Hey. What's up,
Hey,
Sri?
Will.
So what are you drinking today?
I've got White Claw Ruby Grapefruit, which I got to say is the worst flavor of White Claw.
Well, I got this Fever Tree ginger beer. Not exactly alcoholic, but it'll do for today.
Nice.
Cool. So what are we talking about this week?
So for our first episode ever, I have a very evocative title. So we're going to talk about a topic that I'm dubbing communing with ghosts.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's this idea that thinking tools that are coming out these days, like Roam Research and many others, are transforming the way that you write and think into a two-way iterative process rather than a write-only process that you would have with a pen and paper or a word processor or things like that. And so I like to think about it as you're having this communication with the ghosts that are in the machine, whether that machine is in the word processor and the thinking tool itself, or maybe, and we can get into this, even AIs or the people on the web, all kinds of ghosts that you can channel and make your thinking crisper and more full-fledged.
I see. So then what's the specific ghost that you're talking about? Is it the ghost of your previous self or like other people?
I think it's both. So I think there are a couple of different ways to approach this. Actually, maybe we could do just a quick little screen share of Roam and what the promise of a tool like Roam Research is. So this came out maybe a couple of years ago, but Roam Research is like a outliner / text editor that allows you to link your notes together and create this hyperlink based way of weaving your thoughts together.
Let's show a demo and check it out.
Cool. All right, let's do it. I found this cool novel that somebody's writing in Rome. So basically the idea of this is that it's a bullet-based outliner that is similar to like anything that you might have seen before. But the interesting part are these words that are in these double brackets. And these double bracketed words are links. And so you can create basically links, concepts to other concepts. And the interesting part about this is that you can see what other, like where a concept is mentioned. So this is like, I guess, the concept of vaporwave, which is an aesthetic or something. And this person has mentioned it in all of these different places. And so it's a way to weave all of your ideas with link them to each other and find the commonalities across time or across different concepts.
Yeah, it's having the index of a book right alongside of the margin of the pages while you're reading it, which is a little strange. I think
Right.
doesn't Amazon Kindle have something like X-Ray, which is something similar? But the thing is, it's not nearly as accessible. Because one of the things I found with Roam is that the links are bi-directional. So on the web, the links are one way, right? If like links can often get broken when like a resource moves or like a page moves or goes, but like the people that are linking it doesn't know. But in Roam, because it's all the same system, if you rename something, like all the links update. If you change the link, everything that links to it will know. And so that makes it much easier to keep the graph of links intact as you're like editing it. There's other benefits there, but I won't get into that for now, but because we can finish this demo. But yeah, it seems like people are like writing it so that they have like a non-linear novel. Is that what the notion
I
is?
think so. So it's bi-directional. You can rename the concepts, you can refine them over time. You can see what other topics reference the current topic that you're looking at. And in a sense, it's like Wikipedia, except that it's much lower friction in that you can directly link in line by just hitting the double brackets and you get autocomplete and stuff like that. And so going back to your question, in this case, the ghost is the ghost of your former self or your self over time. because I think what happens, what I've seen a lot is that you can take notes in something like Evernote, and then you either completely forget about it, or you write the same thing over and over, or you spend a lot of time trying to tag things in the way so that like the related concepts are there together under the same tag or the same folder or things like that. And I think the idea about Rome is that you can use this hyperlink concept to maintain connections between all your thoughts over time. And the corpus of notes gets better and better over time rather than degrading and deteriorating over time.
Yeah, like, so have you used Evernote or any of the other note-taking apps? And have you tried these more newfangled outlining things like Rome or Notion or what's the other one called? Workflowy?
I've tried Evernote, and I think my experience with Evernote is that you have to do a lot of bookkeeping and make sure things are tagged right, or make sure that things are put in these right folders so that you can maintain some semblance of organization. And I think I was using it for a long time, like back in the like 2010s, right? Like that was the only game in
Yeah.
town. And then I've actually switched to an outliner app. I don't use Rome, but I use Dynalist, which is similar to Workflowy. It's just an infinitely nested like bullet list.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think I was also a Evernote user because I saw a couple people that were using it. I'm like, I guess it's nice to have somewhere to throw up notes. And I think the thing that I used Evernote for mostly was because it could clip stuff from the web. So even if the thing went away, I would still have it. But the thing is, I kept putting it under the same project notebook or the tag. And what I didn't realize until I started using Rome was a lot of these other note-taking apps force you to categorize before you're ready to, or you know what this thing is. Because sometimes you might just have a notion that, oh, this is interesting, but I'm not really sure where to put it. And so that's one aspect. And the other aspect is where you have that immediate feedback as to like for moving stuff around. I find that a lot of times when I work with people, like in order for them to think about something, they would much rather just pull up like a Google Doc or like something real quick so they can jot things down, and outliner or otherwise. And so because it was the only thing that was, I guess, relatively fast enough that could keep up. And especially when you're remote, you do that like collaborative editing. And I think the thing that Rome did that went one better, in addition to the responsiveness and the collaborative editing, is that it didn't force you to categorize before you're ready. So here, I found that Rome's really useful because it has this daily note thing. And one of the things that I have had an issue with for paper journals was that I would try to have different pages categorized to different things, and then I would run out of space and whatnot. I didn't realize that the best way to do it was actually just to record things chronologically and then have an index later to point to everything, because that way like you don't break whatever habit that comes to mind. And so I thought this was until I realized that with Rome, I'm like, oh, I could just put stuff here and then just tag it with whatever I thought was particularly interesting. So anything that I read, I can tag it with something that maybe reminds me. And so you still have to sometimes you can get orphan tags, but for the most part, if you have like a few interests, or like if you have somewhere where you can just collect things, that's where you can see it. I think that's one. But the other thing about that two-way iterative thing I found is that you have to be in the habit of going back and looking at things. And so sometimes being linked to different concepts will help you stumble upon things that you have already saw months ago, and in that way you can make connections. Because I think the type of thinking that Rome helps you do is where you want to make different connections between disparate or sometimes related subjects, but you're not exactly sure how they relate quite yet. And so that's the type of thinking it really helps you with. I think there are other types of thinking that I don't think it's very good at, but I mean but for the majority of, I guess, like writing type of thinking, where you have disparate things that you want to connect, it's very good for that.
It's an interesting question, like what type of thinking does it enable? The people who I see getting excited about it are people who are intellectuals, so to speak. You have this thesis, right? And you say, this is what I believe, and I'm going to just stumble around through life and the internet and whatever, and like gather these like little bits and pieces. And it's like that game Katamari Damacy, where you like roll things together and it snowballs and snowballs. And maybe at the end, you look back, like you're saying, and then you're like, aha, like I now have like all the evidence that I need to back up this hypothesis or maybe refute the hypothesis.
Well, so the founder of Rome had talked about like who his users are. He's like basically conspiracy theorists, like people that like to do exactly what you're saying, which I don't know exactly what it is. I want to gather all these pieces and hook them all together in some like red thread on the wall, but I guess in the computer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I think in that sense, like Rome is like playing with yourself, like
phrasing.
Oh gosh, I never said this podcast is going to be family friendly.
Anyway. Yeah, right.
No, but it's like it's a solitaire game in that like you're challenging yourself, or you're like discovering your old thoughts, or you're putting down these little breadcrumbs for your future self to pick up later, right? Like it almost feels like you're interacting with the like ghosts of your prior thoughts and of your like future desires, right? You think, oh, this thing is going to be interesting for me in the future. And like, I don't know if you do this, like you try to coin a little like catchy phrase that from now on.
Terrible at those, but yeah, I know what you're talking about. I changed titles so much. I'm like, I don't know what to call this.
Right.
Maybe I'd be a better programmer if I could name things, right? So
well, you can rename things in Rome, so I guess you got that advantage going for you. But yeah, so I think that's what I mean. I think that I'm curious to hear, like, do you feel that way? Like, what is the like visceral experience for you as you're interacting with it? Like, how does it feel qualitatively different than just typing something out in Evernote or word processor or something like that?
Yeah, so I mentioned this earlier, one of which was I didn't have to organize ahead of time, and like there was a place to put down daily things so I could focus on like what the thing is rather than like trying to categorize it first, because that's putting the cart before the horse. I think the thing that I wish Rome had better was for search, like a better feature, because like I know I put something in there, but like now I can't find it, because like you can't rely unless your tagging game is really tight, then it's really hard to like refine things just through tags. But I find that like you really do either need to have a really focused core of things that you're really interested in taking notes on in order for you to stumble upon yourself again, stumble upon the ghosts of your past, or you just have to be really good at tagging, or the search has to be much better. Yeah, so I guess short of that, it's been pretty good. I would say, like, I reliably go back to Rome. There's some minor complaints and whatnot, but I do think that it makes me review things more, and I do only run into myself, the ghost of myself, when I'm focused on a particular topic over time, but not so much if you just roam all over the place, I guess. Is that why they called it that? It took me the longest time to figure out that Reddit meant that, people can say, I read it on Reddit, right? So
I actually didn't know that. That makes sense. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Like, I see if you want to use like computer sciencey terms, like you're making a graph, and like you can make a sparse graph or a dense graph. So you can have lots of edges between all your pages and all your topics, or you can have a sparse graph where you have lots and lots of, like you said, like orphaned topics. And I guess whether you run back into yourself and you learn something about your past thinking, or you're able to augment a line of, really depends on how dense your graph is, or whether how frequently do you to take random walks on this graph, right? To take a tour of your little rock garden of thoughts. I think it's actually like relates to like going back to this like thesis of like, what are these ghosts that you're going to commune with? Hype around thinking tools is built around is a very single player experience.
Mhm.
You're just interacting with yourself, just time shifted over time and space and things like that. But you bring up an interesting aspect of like this multiplayer experience where the ghosts that you're interacting with are not actually ghosts, they're actual people, but you're interacting with their thoughts and their knowledge graph. And I know that there's a lot of thought, and I think even the Rome team is hinting at this idea of creating this like massive worldwide interlinked Rome brain, where you have your private sphere of Rome things, but then you can expose facets of that as a public page, which then other people can reference and link to. At that point, it's just like the World Wide Web, but the interface is different.
Yeah,
And
more like an editable, because I think the original vision of the World Wide Web was that it was editable, actually.
Right.
And so it would be more akin to an editable World Wide Web. It certainly won't be as pretty, I guess, but the interface would be common. And so what you're looking for is the actual information. So I guess it'd be like a real-time wiki across everybody. But I guess the biggest challenge there I see is like, how do you merge what people are saying on the same topic? Because you might have your notes and other people might have
I think there's an interesting project which I came across, which is this idea of a federated wiki. So let's say you have an interest group of, okay, imagine this, like, because you hear a lot of these myths of like amazing research labs like Bell Labs. You have these famous researchers who are all working on their independent domain of expertise, but then they can say, okay, we're all part of this group. And you can discover, like through some interface, you can say, oh, this guy down the hall, it turns out he's working on this problem about, I don't know, like information theory, right? And I'm also working on something about information theory. And let's go see what his ideas are.
Yeah, I wish that Twitter was something like that. There's just a massive amount of information dumped onto Twitter like every day, but a lot of it is not well organized. There are threads, but like it's not shown as such really. Like the threads are linear at best. And so I would want something. I can imagine like what you're describing with like the Bell Labs. Like so, like I guess for those of you that don't know, Bell Labs is this place where a lot of the tech research happened. I don't know, way back in the 60s, 70s, something like that.
Yeah, maybe like 60s through 80s, something like
that. And a lot of the cool stuff about technology came out of there. The famous examples is that there were a lot of brilliant people that worked there, but then they always had their door ajar so that, you know, they could welcome in new ideas from other smart people working in adjacent areas, and they could cross-pollinate. And I can imagine something like that for Rome if you're able to outline the things that you're looking at. But I often want something that is Twitter-like in the sense that there's just an abundant amount of information that people are putting together on Twitter, but it doesn't link very well. And so on the other hand, Rome is very personal, and like it's you talk to yourself. And so if there's a way to enmesh the two where you get people building out a knowledge graph that you would be able to get that collaboration going on. Because a minor type of this stuff goes on in Twitter. Like people do talk about their work. You can learn directly about, like, say, COVID-19 from the epidemiologist. I can't say that word, but
epidemiologist.
Epidemiologist. Yeah, because like when COVID first came out, like the media didn't get it right. They were slow on the uptake. And I remember people saying that their general practitioners, like the doctors, the general practitioners, they didn't get it right. They were just like, oh, don't worry about it, that sort of thing. But I would say it's you got to say it for me again. Epidemiologist Twitter that raised the early red flag, and that's how I found out about it. So when you can participate, not only watch, but like if you're able to contribute even just a little bit as to like, hey, here's something that might be of interest. Because I think one of the big things that surprised people about like Web 2.0, if for those of you that can remember that, is that you can get the world to collectively put stuff together that normally would have had like it would be too expensive to get the number of man hours to put that together. So you can like identify trees and insects and mushrooms or whatever, right? There's all sorts of people that want to do that sort of stuff. So for whatever topic, if you can put together a graph of this stuff, that probably was the original vision of the web, I guess, now that I'm thinking about it.
I think so. Yeah, I think actually my former manager was working at CERN, like the Physics Research Institute, where the World Wide Web was invented. He was there when they had released it internally as a tool for, actually, I think for the same purpose that I'm describing, like for researchers to make web pages about what they're working on, so that you can click around and learn what other people are working on.
So did they succeed, or is that still a failure? I don't know.
I'm sure it worked for the research community, because that was a lot of the original like usage of the web, right? It was a lot of like academic web pages and like little quirky web pages about like single topics and things. Obviously, it's kind of taken a very, very different turn. I think that the time is right to go back to this idea, because initially, the friction was really, really high to put something on the web. Like you had to have a place to host it. You had to hand write the HTML. I guess maybe when the web was small enough, like you had this like map of all the web pages of your colleagues who you could link out to.
Yeah.
Right. But like now the web is so huge that, like, imagine you're working on something. Let's say you're working on some pet topic of yours. Like, I want to know about cryptocurrency and NFTs, but I want to know what other people are thinking about this stuff.
Employable of non-independent thinking, but you go on.
Yeah, that's true. Which maybe is not good for investing, but maybe it's good for things like research, where you build upon other people's thinking.
Right.
But like,
if you can selectively figure out what people you care about, or like the authorities you care about, what they're thinking. But
so like, how do I find this out? So one way is like, I think Twitter, a lot of interesting conversations and hot takes. People make Twitter threads, but Twitter threads, like the whole UI is supposed to be this like ephemeral timeline based UI. It's not meant for a lasting like portfolio of thoughts. If I'm working on something, what I want to know about is, hey, what does like XYZ interesting people who are thinking in the space, how are they thinking about this?
The interesting stuff about any topic is usually at the edge of knowledge. And for you to get there, usually there's a lot of stuff that you have to trudge through, the basics or whatever. And so if you're new to something, it'd be nice. It would be much easier to get to the edge of knowledge, is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think this is pulling it back to like the idea of that process being built into something like a text editor or a tool of some type. Let's say today you're a very modern person and you use your own like Roam workspace and you collect all your thoughts about like a topic, and then you go and scour the web or browse Twitter every day and gather information this way. But that's a very long iterative loop. So
right now, the thing that you're pointing out is right now, if you don't just consume without processing, like the steps are very distinct. Like you need to pull stuff directly, like you need to pull it from the web, whether you cut and paste text or the URL. Yeah, like it for even the workflow for Roam. I wish that Roam was in the web browser itself as I'm looking at other pages, so I can pull clips much more easily. Because right now I have to cut and paste stuff, switch to a different tab, and use the markup to make do. It's not like I can link concepts as I'm like browsing different web pages or anything like that. Recently on HN, there was another browser called the Bonsai Browser. It was supposed to help programmers think clearly. Did you see that one?
I did see that. Yeah.
Yeah, I installed it. It looked nice, but I couldn't quite, it wasn't exactly intuitive because I don't think they did enough user testing. But like the general idea was that it's not like a separate application. You bring it up with like a hotkey because it's always on. And then as you're browsing the web, you can save a clip to your inbox. And then after that inbox, you can like categorize them in this ZUI, like a zoomable user interface.
Right.
Where you can like create graphs of links. You can create nodes with web page thumbnails in them and then link them together, stuff like that. So I think it's close to that mark, but it's not quite there of what we're talking about, because we're talking about like feeding our own conspiracy theorist tendencies. But hopefully that is not leading us astray. Like it's leading us to like think better. So like the act of browsing is, or the act of writing happens as you browse. Like it doesn't have to be Shakespeare, but like you're gathering snippets, making comments, and then you might organize or connect them a little bit before like sending them out, right? Onto a Twitter-like thing that has a graph, which that might be an interesting experience, because then you get a million monkeys like making connections for things, maybe some things that don't need connections, but probably there's some of them that are legitimate. And I guess according to the Memex vision, that if enough people are treading the same path over and over again, then that's probably more legitimate than any of the other connections that have been made.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. So you're thinking about it from the perspective of, what if you were browsing the web and you see other content, and in response to that content triggers a thought, or you have something to contribute, something to say about the matter. Right. And then you jot that somewhere and you ship it out, and it gets added to this like collective knowledge about that thing.
Yeah.
So interestingly, I saw something else on HN that takes the different approach. It's this open source project called Reverie. This tool is a semantic search engine. So it's not like a token-based search engine that searches exactly for the text that you search for, but it uses like some deep learning, blah, 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 to find similar text on the web or among things that you've saved. So
so the corpus is the stuff, like the things that you found interesting, and the search query is whatever he highlighted there in the web page that he's browsing, so that he's more easily able to make connections. I guess so. Some people would say the danger there is you're asking the algorithm to make the connections for you, but like barring that, like this makes a lot of sense to me, in along the lines of, well, Like I'm browsing things, but like I wanna see what this has a connection to. And so then one step further with that is, what are other things that other people have saved that might be relevant? Like that would probably
Yeah.
surface pretty quickly.
And I was thinking, right, like imagine that you built this into an editor interface. So like let's say that you're jotting some thought, you're running hypothesis about something like NFTs
Future of
are the
everything.
future of everything.
Yeah.
They're going to power the multiverse,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so you write in your editor, you're like NFTs are going to power the multiverse of the future. And you're like, okay, great, but like, is this really the case? Or like, are there other crazy people like me out there? And like, you can
Or
highlight
also,
that
like,
thing.
are there people that in this day and age, also just as important, are there people that disagree?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
so
exactly.
you highlight that thing, and then
And then
the
and then I
semantics.
can imagine, yeah, this like semantic search. Like imagine you can highlight whatever you're writing, and then you can pull up a sidebar of like other things people have written on the web in their own Roam workspace. We were describing this like there's a gather consume phase and a write phase.
Yeah.
And it's like that's analogous to something like a compiled
Right, the
language,
REPL, right? And so we
right?
want something where the REPL, something that a REPL would provide, like a shorter iteration phase where like this context switching, like you shouldn't have to have a giant context switch between reading and writing, because right now it's still a little too much, because you need to switch tabs. You don't have to switch computers per se, but you still have to switch tabs, switch context. It should be in the same context that you're doing your reading and writing.
One saying that I've heard is like, at some point, if you make something just the same thing quantitatively, like better and better, or faster and faster, or simpler and simpler, at some point there's like a switchover point where it becomes just so fast that it becomes a qualitatively different experience.
Yeah.
So the difference between using a REPL and using a compiler is a huge step change, right? In terms of how do you develop, right? And so I imagine if you have a tool where you're now not just communing with a ghost of yourself, but now you're plugged into all these ghosts of the world,
The hive
right?
mind.
Who like a hive mind. Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't know. I get the sense of like it could be really bad.
Right. So that could be appealing, and we're like sitting in the future where we see like the worst version of like one of the bad versions of itself. Twitter has its good points, but I think universally people feel like they get some really bad experiences out of it. And so like
Yeah.
I think these ideas are not new. They're like what, 70 odd years, 50
Yeah.
years, 60 years old or something like that, but like somehow we still haven't quite fulfilled that notion. And so like where do we go wrong in the way that we set up our thinking, like collective thinking tools then? Like, so where do we fall short? You're saying like we're almost there, but like what's the diff?
I think it's like, yeah, so I think there was this utopia, and it worked really well when the internet was just academic internet. I think there was like lively collaborations that were happening between researchers and linking to each other's web pages about different things. And then we went to this model of the internet for consumption, where the majority of the people on the internet were just reading, right? And there was not actually any good way to write. And then there was this whole Web 2.0 thing, which was this idea that hey, people can actually contribute back into the web.
And then you can
And
it's the purpose of the centralized aggregator to make sense of the deluge from
yeah,
the masses, right? And so it turns out that you can make sense of it or surface really interesting things as a result. And that's something that we didn't know or thought to do before Web 2.0, I think.
yeah, exactly. There's enough content being created, and there's enough niches of and different styles of thinking on the web that is happening, right? People are just writing conspiracy theories, people are writing activism stuff, like like
Hopefully
where
we have less of the former.
yeah, that, well, I don't
But
know.
I guess
I have no
that's just
judgment.
me, but
I think we should have more
no,
computer theories.
well, like the thing that's probably a topic for another day. I would like more true things on the internet. So like I'm not like reading the internet and actively making myself stupider.
No. Okay, so I think that's antithetical to how we get to the future. I think that
uh
the idea, right, is
we should
now
have more of that, more of the crazy stuff
you have the
that,
chaos.
and then you have some way to, because like the storage space for the internet is infinite effectively.
Yeah,
And so
exactly.
that's one of the lessons for the web 2.0 is that you have that long tail where you have infinite shelf space, and it's up to you to figure out what is valuable or not. And so okay,
Mhm.
in light of that, I'll take that back. Let the
Yeah,
thousand flowers bloom of conspiracy
exactly.
theorists. And so maybe we'll have a better way to filter all that stuff out. But yeah, go on. You were saying like,
No, so I think, yeah, like I think like, and interestingly, right, like there are these subcultures that are apparent in like Twitter, right? Like where there's whatever medical Twitter, epidemiology Twitter, there's tech Twitter, obviously. And what people mean by XYZ Twitter, it's not a separate UI. It's the idea that you can go to this place and you can plug yourself into a network, and through your choice of network, you now receive a certain angle, like you like move your camera, right, and you say, okay, I am focusing now on this little slice of the internet, right, or this slice of human thought. But what we're missing is like how what you described. There's no index, there's no way to get a handle on what's going on and how you can contribute and how you can like consume this in some any like actually usable way.
yeah, there's no structured way, because like on Twitter, if you follow like, I don't know, like crypto Twitter or something like that, you start with somebody that's talking about crypto, and then you just look at the people that they interact with the most, or like who follows them, or who they, and so over time you build up like this follow list of people that are talking about crypto, and that's like your gradual shifting of your viewpoint or camera to like people that are talking about it, right?
Yeah.
And but the thing is like there's no structured way to do it. But as I'm saying that, I'm reminded of like the semantic web. But like
Yeah, right.
that thing has just been that thing to me is even more of a failure, because you get like nobody uses it really. Like there's
Yeah,
some
so
remnants of that, like the metadata that like Facebook shows in your like little
right,
link
like what's
shares. And
the
yeah,
main image? Yeah,
they wanted to provide like a the word escapes me, but like a formalized structure of how to talk about what was on a web page. And so you can mark it up with like metadata. So like you can say this web page talks about this a person, or something like that, right?
yeah. I think that failed just because it's so much burden, and the economics, like you said, like don't make sense to do. I think that's why things like semantic search are interesting, because
We finally
you don't
got
need
like
to,
deep learning working and stuff like that.
yeah, like you don't need to mark up this page is about this topic, but like you can just write or you just spew out content, right? And the idea is that as long as it's sensible, like makes sense to a human being, a machine at this point can also understand, at least in broad strokes, like, oh, okay, this is what's going on in this paragraph. And so maybe now you can have this like chaotic, rather than semantic web, you have like a chaotic web
Yeah.
where nothing is marked up, but you can still, given a piece of text, go to find all the other text that like is potentially related in a variety of ways. Like, and it's not just, I think we showed the semantic search, and semantic search is like finding similar text, but you can imagine with sufficiently state of the art models that we have now, you can say, given a piece of text, like find me the opposing viewpoints, right? Like things that are about the same topic, but have a different stance, right? Or a negative stance on it or a positive stance on it.
so that I can refute them whenever they come up.
Yeah,
That's a
exactly.
benefit to oneself, right? So
Yeah, exactly. And so I think now what we're looking for is a way, a meta layer to connect these so that you can think and then you can find what other people are thinking about and you can connect it back into your thinking. Like we don't have the tooling around how to interact with this yet.
yeah, I think the for me, like my answer to like what the diff was is that with collaborative thinking tools, we didn't take into account, well, Twitter was never meant to be a collaborative thinking tool, but like it didn't take into account like just what people like to do or what people are motivated to do with even simple features like with a like, right? Or
Yeah.
retweets and just counting likes and retweets. I'm on Twitter, but I am a terrible Twitterer. I say things and nobody cares, right? And
Yes. Same.
right. And so but the thing is, they have like an analytics dashboard to tell me, oh, what are the things that got engagement? And I found that the things that got the most engagement were if I was talking on somebody else's thread who was already more popular than me. And then I generally don't say things that are incendiary, but like if somebody like makes a incendiary remark or like something more aggressive towards it, that's what gets more attention, right?
Yeah, you bring up some interesting points. Like, I think at some point, like, let's say that we get to the future that we're talking about, where you're building your knowledge like plugged into this community. As soon as you have more than one person in the room, right? You're going to have politics, you're going to have fights and disagreements. And I think you see this in open source projects, you see this on Wikipedia, you see it anywhere where even though open source and Wikipedia and all of these have these high-minded goals, the messiness of human interaction comes in. And so it's going to be interesting, especially as we think about knowledge creation and tools for thinking, right? As soon as it becomes this multiplayer experience, then like you're going to have to
Yeah.
like have some social layer that like enforces that people are civil, that people
Yeah.
don't like, doesn't go crazy.
That reminds me where people talk about money as being a social construct to get people to work together without knowing or trusting each other, right? It's the
Yeah.
same thing with the social construct of a company. So, because like these things we've invented are a way to get us to cooperate with each other above Dunbar's number of, say, around 100 people, 50 people or so, right? And so we're
Yeah.
able to scale people, but then maybe we haven't found whatever the equivalent of a money or companies are for civil discourse.
Maybe it's actually just cryptocurrency. No,
Are you joking? Because like, I
I'm
don't,
not. I'm
because
not.
that's
I'm
what
not.
some people say. And before I'm like, I don't know, that's a stretch, but maybe
Maybe
now
right.
that
Like, okay, this is the. Imagine this is like such a weird future. Imagine that we want to know something about. I'll stop picking on NFTs now. Like, we want to know something about like carbon sequestration. And so you plug yourself into this network of people who are thinking about carbon sequestration or carbon capture, or whatever it is, and you do your own research, and you're now interacting with all these ghosts of people and their knowledge graphs, and you're contributing to this overall knowledge about carbon capture, and somehow you can get rewarded for it. Like, this is the whole idea of Web3 and Ethereum and
oh, I
all of that
see.
stuff, right? Where you can people can contribute to you, tip you like for furthering knowledge some way, or you can like, you're now polluting the ecosystem with a bunch of garbage, like they can start to demerit you somehow.
Okay, that
And I
is,
was thinking like you can even set like bounties, right? You can say, I have this research question, all you smart people can try to work on this and like you can earn some of this bounty. Like, can you further knowledge this way? Like, imagine if you're plugged in, not just your REPL is not just like where you write something and you see the result, but it's like you write something, you see the result, and you get paid for that thing. Like,
Yeah,
that's a really tight REPL.
one of the I didn't know how to formulate or structure this because it sounds like a crazy thing, but one of the things I was thinking about in relation to you write stuff and get paid for it, but how do you get credited for it? If you're actually writing on a graph, then is it possible to credit or debit you with back propagation? So like,
Oh, with as it gets
yeah,
linked to
right,
more.
because the end result, the output, because there are some like cryptocurrency groups that form DAOs, which are decentralized autonomous organizations. And what they do is they use their membership tokens to vote on, or well, so they invest money into the DAO. So they pool their money together. And the purpose of some of these DAOs is some are governance, but others are investment vehicles. So they collectively decide like, what digital tokens should we buy, or what like cryptocurrency projects should we put money into, or like what like NFTs should we buy. There's like a yield group, yield I don't blah blah. It's a DAO, but they speculate on digital real estate in various games is I believe one of the things that they do. And so you could see that if you picture the knowledge graph as a with an output where it leads to an action for the group where they make an investment, then the investment with the greatest returns could be back propagated to the person or the people who most contributed to the decision of like making that investment decision. I don't know how you would specify the weights. Maybe you do it ahead. Yeah, like there's a lot of details to be worked out there, obviously, because it's like a crazy hand wavy thing. But like, so in this way, you would be able to credit somebody for having the idea to do something. And so you could imagine, like right now, like in companies and organizations, like the contribution of everybody's just blurred together because nobody's going to like take the time to put in this metadata to say like what email asked them to do this or reminded them of this or that, right? But if you have this knowledge graph where you're like, okay, like based on what this said, this is my thought, so on and so forth, right? Then maybe you would have something like this, and you just back propagate the profit from the investment, and so everybody gets credited that way.
Yeah, that would be interesting. So I think even independent of an entity taking action, algorithms like the PageRank algorithm works exactly in this way, where it builds a graph of who links to what. If you link to something, you're crediting them for saying something interesting. And then it calculates what is the quality of the web page based on where you link to and what the quality of the people that link to you. And so it's interesting. We keep coming back to this idea that like the web exists, it had these ideals, and like, oh, we should apply some type of crediting system to this. And then we're like, oh, PageRank exists and it works in this way. And I keep coming back to like, well, what's actually different here? Like links exist. And,
right. All the stuff that we're talking about exists, but like somehow like the thing that we're talking about, if it exists, we would have this ideal, but obviously we have all the stuff and none of the ideals exist, right? Well, it's in some form it does, but not in the way that we're talking about.
Yeah, I think like it maybe turns out human nature is such that like this is just how things are, but we're supposed to be optimists in podcasts. So I think I would say that when it worked, it worked. When people were creating these small little sites and web pages about single interest topics, areas of research, and then PageRank came and then like did all its calculations, and then it found out like, oh, it turns out everybody's linking to this one guy's research. He or she must be like a very important person in this field, and it worked. And then the crowd came, right? Like the whole world came on the internet, and their internet was very different from this other internet that existed.
So
right?
it could just be that we haven't figured out how to scale that social thinking aspect of the web, like in the way that we don't have the. It's like before we had money, or like how do we scale an economy like with the barter system? It could probably just be nigh impossible to do unless we figure out like this mechanism to do that, right? And so it could be something similar where we haven't figured out this mechanism, like this. I don't even, it's even hard for me to picture like what it would look like, but for like collective thinking or civil discourse or something like that, for larger groups, right? For larger groups, because we do have civil discourse for smaller groups up to some point within trusted groups, but it currently just does not scale.
Yeah, I don't know what form it will look like, where it, like if it were to ever happen. Like, yeah, I just keep thinking of typing in a REPL, like, and you type in some thought, and then you hit enter, and then you get back all these replies, or either direct replies to that, or like, here's what all the other people said about the same thing. And then somehow you just like get money. Like every time you hit enter, you get money. And that encourages you to keep typing more things into this.
And so I guess now that you have deep learning that is much better at like reading and writing stuff, like would you welcome bots as part of the knowledge graph building? Like,
I think so. I think and maybe for the last screen share of the night. So I don't know if bots are quite it, right? But have you seen this thing?
No,
like, have you seen Write with Transformer?
No.
So it's a text editor which is powered by a transformer based deep learning model, which is a generative model. And what you can do here is you can tab complete like what you're thinking about. So you can trigger the transformer command to execute the text.
Which model is this? GPT-2?
It's GPT-2, yeah, because I think that's the only model that can be publicly replicated at this point. But I imagine if you have GPT-3, you could use that. But yeah, I think that this idea that like you could augment your writing with bots, right? And I don't know what's the place for this thing. Like,
well, so one of the things is in along the lines of that REPL knowledge graph, like you could have a bot like do the grunt work of things that were already pretty obvious, I guess. And so, or you only put it on tasks where it makes non-obvious connections. And so I think I played around with GPT-3, and I found that it is very good for creative writing tasks. You give it a prompt, a couple examples, and it was pretty good at coming up with a whole bunch of other ones. Like sometimes you need to like say, no, this is not good, this is good, but that's been pretty helpful. And so here I imagine with something like Write with Transformer, for things where you just need a little bit of juice, maybe like what traditionally people have taken LSD for, right? They need to just have suggestions or some creative juices. You're not going to take the suggestions wholesale, but yeah, I would almost want the suggestions to be on the sidebar. And so as you're typing, it'll suggest other things, or maybe like it only suggests things if you say you're stuck or something like that.
Or I think we're getting to the point where you can also have a model which is a proponent, like supports, is bullish on cryptocurrency, and then you have another model that's like bearish on cryptocurrency. And what you do is like you evoke the bull ghost and the bear ghost, and you say cryptocurrency is the blah 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 blah, and you hit tab complete.
Right, but you have it's like you have the devil and the angel on your shoulder telling you, like giving you suggestions, or like the myriad of other things where like maybe you have a gaggle of people in your head and making suggestions, and they all have different personalities and viewpoints, and you might pick one of them. to help you out with
Yeah.
whatever you're creatively stuck on.
Yeah, I guess so. And imagine you have like a GPT-3 that's fine-tuned on each person in this network, right? Going back to this like network of people idea. And maybe they've written about something, or maybe they haven't. But you just want to say, I'm writing about this, writing about this, and I want to sort of see what like AI will has to say about this. It's read your whole Rome notebook and like knows what things you say about things, and then I say autocomplete, and I'm like, oh, like Will's AI says this, and maybe it is what you think about it, maybe it's not, but like it's a different perspective at least from somebody else's AI that
Yeah,
says something different.
that's weird because it's almost as if like I can get you on the phone without you actually being on the phone, right? Like I can get you to like give me your thoughts about something nobody like. I can get you to give me your thoughts about something you've never actually written about.
Yeah, right.
And then you can through your AI, you can like if the thing was trained on your corpus, then you can tell me that. And so it may be gibberish, it may not be, right? Because if obviously you've never talked about something, then it's not going to know. But if it's adjacent to it, then maybe it'll come up with something that sounds like you. Yeah, maybe. And especially if you were dead, that would be pretty interesting too.
Yes. Yeah. If you were dead, maybe it's irrelevant to me what you actually think about something, but I know, oh, I want to know about somebody of the style of Will, what they might say about something. And it doesn't matter what you actually think about it. If it knows that this is your general stance, like maybe it will
you're
like,
looking for the style rather than what I would actually say, right? So like, yeah, like you want, say like you want somebody to comment on, I don't know, on the housing crisis, but in the style of Chris Rock or something like that.
yeah, exactly. Which I think would be hilarious.
Right,
I
which
think
Chris Rock has, to my knowledge, never commented on, but like you should. I think nowadays we can get that synthesis that we didn't have available before. So Chris Rock may not actually have that opinion, but you're just looking for that particular style.
Yeah, and like maybe I want to insert some humor into this piece, and I know that like or like more seriously, I can say like I want to know what Karl Marx has to say about like building high rises in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Right. Obviously, he has no opinion on that. He's long dead, but maybe Karl Marx AI will tell me something unique that other people aren't telling me, because Karl Marx is a very unique thinker, and maybe like something trained on his style, but then seeded with this topic will result in some interesting line of thought which nobody else is currently having these days.
Yeah, that's interesting because at least with the generative art stuff that I'm seeing on NFTs, it's stuff that you, I guess, wouldn't have imagined that computers would come up with. Not just computers, but like anybody. Like I would not thought that these two things could be meshed together. And I guess in the same way, it's not that far-fetched to have Karl Marx and high-rise buildings be meshed together and see if there's anything interesting that falls out of it.
Yeah, but I mean, I think we're not there yet. But that would be crazy, right? Imagine you had a REPL now that you hit enter, you get the wisdom of the crowd, you get the wisdom of Karl Marx, and you also get money in the bank. Like I don't know.
Would people leave their desks? Maybe to go out for a walk. Yeah. Let's say so. I guess the danger of that is that people just like feed it to the AI and they go on a walk. And so hopefully they're making money with whatever their AI is posting over and over again. And then so because that like, and then some later AI is going to seed or train on that corpus out there because like who can resist the urge? then you're just gonna get like a feedback loop of this stuff where it might end up being gibberish. I don't know. Like at some
But
point,
then those AIs won't be getting paid. Like that's why the payment layer exists.
so that's a signal. But then that's only if there's enough people evaluating it to say this is worth something, or if the AIs find it useful themselves, or like understandable or useful themselves. But that said, like that future is why do we think it's interesting? Because I guess we don't have it today. And if you, I guess the idea is not like knowledge for knowledge's sake, but like if you can harness the collective like mental power of everyone, no matter how big or small, I guess, right? And so right now,
or alive or dead.
Yeah, or alive or dead, then we could find ways to solve problems or take actions on the things that require solving problems, take action. And we see like small focused versions of this nowadays, like Patreons and like Indiegogo campaigns to, I don't know, pay for somebody's medical bills is like a small focused version of like an action for the betterment of like solving like somebody's specific problems. But
Yeah.
I think what we're thinking and talking about is envisioning like of a single global system that everybody has agreed to tap into to facilitate this sort of stuff, I guess, right?
Yeah. And whether that's a utopia or it's a dystopia, I think obviously I hope it's a utopia.
Right.
But if it's a dystopia, I think it'll be a really entertaining one.
Yeah, bring on the memes. I mean, like, I can see memes getting paid like up the wazoo for this sort of stuff too, right? Like,
yeah.
But like this conversation at the very least made me take a step back and feel like, oh, okay, like we've taken a couple of shots at the original vision of the web and feel like there's something, but it's not quite there. And it's easy to forget that because like you use it day to day, you're just like, this is just how things are, right? But if you read about the lofty ideals that people had for the web originally, it's different than the experience that you have today. Better in some ways and worse in others.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Like the vision for the web spans like so broad. Like we started, like if you unwind the stack all the way, like at the beginning, we were talking about a text editor that had links, right? And like, what does that mean? And it means that you can connect ideas. And then like, obviously the next step is like, okay, can you connect ideas across people? And then like, okay, now people are involved. How do you credit and attribute like rewards? And I think like it's interesting, all of these things the early pioneers were already thinking about, right? Because they had several approaches to this, and we haven't figured it out yet.
And like when I remember this interview with Ted Nelson, like the reporter just had no idea what he was talking about. It's this stuff is just so hard to picture, and even for us, like we live in it day to day, it's still a little hard to picture, I think. But yeah, I guess that's the our optimism has escaped velocity, I guess. So I guess we can cap it here. We've been talking.
That's a cut.
Yeah, we've been talking about. So this is Will and
this is Street,
and we're signing off and hope to see you next week. Talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.
Bye.